You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for tuning in. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And joining me today, as always, is my co-host, Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. You can also listen to him on the Best Coast Boys podcast. Landon, week one is just about over. Are you feeling better or worse about the Cowboys after watching all these games?
It's funny. I was reading somewhere on Twitter that said that despite the fact that the Cowboys lost their game, their chances of winning up the NFC, their betting odds, I think, somewhere at some betting house went up like 8% at winning the NFC East. So, and I kind of agree with that. I mean, I think after watching this week one game, we'll talk about Washington and New York in a second, but and even with Philadelphia, I feel better about where the Cowboys are inside their own division than before we started the season.
I have mixed feelings. Because honestly, I'll tell you what, on Friday afternoon, I was feeling real down about this Cowboys team. And it actually didn't have to do with the loss. Like, I get the loss. It was fine. They could have won that game. But the injury to Michael Gallup and the suspension of Lael Collins, which we're going to get to in just a second, made me feel real pessimistic about this team long term. But I think you mentioned it, right? Like, Washington did not look great. The Giants, holy cow, did the Giants look bad. And then the Eagles look good. So, I mean, I just have a hard time believing anybody's going to run away with the division, especially after a couple other injuries that happened this week. But we'll get into all that in just a second. Landon, let's first start with the big news that happened on Friday. We didn't record a show Friday afternoon, but it was announced that Lael Collins, the Cowboys' right tackle, has been suspended for 5 games. I believe he will be eligible to come back. Is it October 31st? Is his first game that he can come back? How big of a loss is that for the Cowboys?
I mean, it's a big loss. I mean, I think you lose one of your starting offensive tackles who actually played well. I thought week one
He did play well.
Yeah, and so I think you're going to find a way to. We'll talk about recourse after we discuss the other loss too, because I think that they are kind of tied together on how you kind of solve that. But I think that as far as just speaking strictly from the Lael Collins, side of things, it's frustrating, right? Just he missed the entirety of last year. Now he's going to miss 5 games, early in the season this year. The hope is that he comes back and hits the ground running for when he gets back. But it's just frustrating for a guy who, just look back where we were in 2019 with Lael Collins. We thought he was going to end up being, one of the best right tackles in football. I mean, he had played an incredible year and really started to kind of, grow into his own at the position. And you still see that when he's playing. Yeah. But it's just, an unfortunate level of kind of back and forth that's happening because of the injury, the surgery last year, the suspension now. It's just frustrating. I still have a lot of faith in Lael Collins, but this is just unfortunately another setback he's going to have to get through.
So there's a lot of different directions we can take this, but let's first start with what happened. I'm not sure we fully know yet. So it does sound like he missed a handful of tests, right? And the reason why he missed those tests are unclear, but he's been tested, over 100 times since 2019. But it sounds like he missed 7 or 8 tests. And once you get to that many, it starts to be where the games pile up for suspension. Now, the Cowboys still think they could get that suspension reduced. I'm not banking on it, but it just seems like this is something you got to take care of, Lael. Like, you're putting your team in jeopardy by not being responsible, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I love LC, but I don't know that he's exactly the most responsible or person there in that sense. Yeah. I think it likely has to do with all the abnormalities and the inconsistencies that are dealing with the COVID protocol. Has I heard somewhere that they're going to make an argument that some of the tests that he missed were on days that the Cowboys had COVID outbreaks and they were sent home. that's not an excuse for not getting your test done, but it's the excuse they're going to provide for him. So, it's unfortunate. It's tough because you want to be able to trust Lael Collins, and you do on the field, but off the field at this point, even though it's not crazy stuff that's happening, it's stuff that's keeping him off the field, and that's worrisome. So he needs to find a way to kind of get back on track. Again, I'm not worried about it long term. It's just super annoying that we're going to have to deal with this.
Now, the one thing we should talk about from a long-term perspective, and I don't believe the Cowboys are going to move on from Lael. However, this suspension makes it way more likely that they could, right? And way easier to do so, because now this suspension has voided all of his guaranteed money on the rest of his deal, and it's voided all of the injury guaranteed money. So if the Cowboys just don't feel like they can trust him, if they want to do something next offseason or the year after that, they can do it. But this move actually could cost Lael a ton of money, and that's kind of concerning. One more thing before we move on. How do you want the Cowboys to handle the right tackle position for the next 5 weeks? Do you want it to be Zach Martin? Do you want it to be Heinicke? Do you want it to be Terrence Steele? What would you like to see the Cowboys do?
I think it should be Heinicke. I mean, I think the Cowboys have ways to – and if we want to get into this, I think what the Cowboys need to do, and we'll talk about Michael Gallup too, but they're going to need to use more 12 personnel, more 20 personnel, more 21 personnel. They'll give Heinicke some help in pass pro. They'll slide protection his way. We'll probably see a few less 5-man protection sets.
Probably.
It's just and honestly, I mean, Michael Gallup's not on the team, so maybe that's not, you've got one less guy that you're trying to get the ball to. So I think that the Cowboys will be able to get through this. They
can handle one injury, right?
Yeah, totally. And the thing is too, is that I think that there's been a lot of hand-wringing over Heinicke, and a lot of it based on one-on-ones in training camp and that sort of thing. There are ways to help veteran tackles in pass protection. I think the key thing here with Heinicke that's better than has been in most of our past offensive tackles is that I think Heinicke is a plus player in the run game. And I think that value, that has value. I think in the past, we've had guys who have been terrible at both pass protection and run blocking. Heinicke is, I think, average at pass protection. He's going to need some help. Ezekiel Elliott and Jarwin and Schultz will help there. But I think as a run blocker, he's a good run blocker. So at least there's something there for the offensive tackle to lean on. I don't think that this is a death blow for the Cowboys offense by any stretch of the imagination. It certainly is annoying, though.
It's annoying. Now, the thing is, you should be getting Lael Collins back in 5 weeks, right? So it's not like he's going to be coming back from an injury. He should be fresh. Now, hopefully he takes care of all the other things he needs to take care of off the field. But I feel like they can handle one absence, right? Especially if Zach Martin comes back and plays well. He has no COVID concerns. You can slide protection to help out Heinicke. Zeke can help over there. It's if something else were to happen. If Tyron goes down for the next couple of weeks and now you're having to play Heinicke and Terrence Steele, that's where it gets to be an issue. And we saw that last year. But I do think they can survive for the next couple of weeks without Lael Collins, assuming the game plan is good and Heinicke isn't awful. I think they'll be okay. Let's take a quick break so I can tell you guys about Run Your Pool. Football season is back. Let's make the most of it with a better way to create your custom pool at runyourpool.com, the premier sports pool hosting service. Run Your Pool makes it ridiculously easy to run a football pool with your friends, family, or office mates. They offer dozens of formats, including Survivor, Pick'em, Squares, Margin of Victory, Confidence Pools, and so much more. Run Your Pool hosts formats for the NFL and college football season, with 1-week games, season-long playoffs, or the Super Bowl. Unlike other fantasy sports platforms, Run Your Pool has options and settings to make it your own, the way that you want to play it. You can even brand your pool for businesses, bars, or restaurants. Reconnect with your friends and join nearly 2 million football fans to make every game action-packed this season. All you have to do is go to runyourpool.com/lockedon and you'll get $10 off. That is runyourpool.com/lockedon. All right, Landon, the Cowboys also lost another offensive starter in week 1 against Tampa Bay, and that's Michael Gallup, who's dealing with a calf injury. The report is 3 to 5 weeks, But with the Cowboys having a week 7 bye, I got a feeling they're going to be very cautious here.
Yeah.
Make sure that he's back in week 9. How big of a loss is this for Dallas?
It's not great. I mean, it's you definitely would love to have your 3 receiver set that you've been talking about all off season, and I think you will get it back for the latter part of the season. And I do think that it's a situation where the Cowboys aren't going to miss him so much that they should rush him back. I'd much rather have Gallup for the second half of the season when you'll need him. I think for up until now, let's not rush him back. I mean, I think for the reasons that I talked about with Collins, right, is that this is where the benefit of having the depth, maybe not necessarily at wide receiver, but also at these other 11th offensive person spots is helpful, right? And by 11th offensive person, I mean like the second tight end, the second running back. These are guys who you can find ways to kind of mitigate the loss of Gallup by using more 20, more 21, more 12 personnel. You have the horses to run this and actually succeed there because you have 2 tight ends that you feel good about that receiving the football. You've got Pollard who took several snaps, a bunch of snaps out of the slot this year, so you're going to get options there. And you like Cedric Wilson. I mean, let's not.
Well, they like Noah Brown as well, who should be back
as well.
Yep.
And I think that also, and I think Noah Brown. I mean, Cedric Wilson is the guy that's going to get the majority of the replacement snaps, as a 1-to-1 replacement snaps as wide receiver 3. But I do think that Brown will also see an uptick there because Brown is a little bit more like the kind of receiver that Gallup is, right? He's a contested catch guy.
You could also use Noah Brown a little bit too to help in the run game. If you're worried about not Ty Nsekhe, like you can have him actually come in and play. Chip a linebacker or chip a defensive end. Like he can do those things. So
yeah, absolutely. And I just think you have an offense that's diverse. You've already seen them kind of deploy a bunch of different personnels in that first game, so that they're comfortable doing that. You have a diverse, deep offense that has playmakers at other positions. You can rely on that for the next 4 or 5 weeks until Gallup gets back. So there's lots of ways to kind of make up for the loss there. Let's not forget. Gallup is wide receiver 3 on this team. Yeah. So you still have Cooper, you still have Lamb, who struggled his first week, but I think we'll have a bounce back week, coming up. And I think the Cowboys offense is still not going to have problems scoring points despite the fact of losing 2 key starters.
Just a little side note before we get back to Michael Gallup. I was not surprised that CeeDee Lamb struggled a ton in that game against Tampa Bay. He missed a lot of practice time with COVID. And I mean, it's pretty clear that he was symptomatic, right? He talked about not being able to smell and taste stuff. So how many practices did he really have under his belt after he got COVID before they played that Tampa Bay game? Like 2, 3?
Yeah, it's a solid point, and it's kind of what we discussed about Zeke last year, right? Yep. Where we kind of just he had COVID and then he didn't. And then we didn't really talk about the fact that, there's lingering effects there and how that might affect you physically. And I think it applies here with CD as well. And I also think that we need to be careful to see exactly how much that might apply to Zach Martin if he comes off the COVID list as well.
It's why I never thought Zach Martin playing last week was realistic because he had some pretty severe symptoms, right? So I'm a little bit worried about him this week. Let's kind of monitor the practice report, see how much he's practicing. It'll give us an idea. But back to Michael Gallup. I do think it's important to remember, even in a game where the Cowboys were throwing the ball, 55, 58 times?
Yeah.
Gallup was only seeing like basically 1 target a quarter, right? It wasn't like this was somebody who they were featuring in their passing offense. The Cowboys can kind of condense their passing offense down to just tight ends across the middle, and let's feed Amari and CD, and I think they'll be okay. It does take maybe the ceiling away a little bit, but I do think they're going to be okay. Now, they play some pretty good defenses coming up, Landon, outside of Philadelphia in week 3. But I think they'll be okay with the Michael Gallup thing. I think the Cowboys are going to be very cautious here because they know it's more important to have a healthy Michael Gallup in week 9 than it is a compromised week or Michael Gallup in week 6 or week 7. I just think they're going to be cautious here.
Yeah, they're not playing – they're playing some good defenses, but they are playing some specifically not great pass defenses.
Yes.
That are teams that are probably more pass rush heavy than they are coverage heavy, if that's the
Chargers.
best way to put it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
the Eagles too, honestly. But yeah, I think that, the Chargers specifically, that we got to watch out for what they're doing up front. But I think there's still, even with the wide receiver core as it currently stands, there's a lot of hay to be made against that Charger secondary.
Yep.
So I think the Cowboys can, this is why having offensive depth is good, is because you can lose two guys like this and, kind of keep going.
Yep.
You mentioned the ceiling. I think, the ceiling is limited based simply on the idea that you don't have the same dynamism in all your packages, right?
Yes.
That you did before. I think that's where that kind of ceiling comes in. And I agree there, but I do think that the Cowboys still have plenty that they have in their bag that they can do to kind of, keep offenses on their toes. And they still have so many playmakers on this offense that, the loss of a guy that I think we probably had 10 targets or something like that in 9 or 10 targets in the first game. So, we aren't, it's tough because this is the week one and we always forget that injuries happen and all that. But this isn't going to be hopefully a altering course sort of injury that knocks the offense off their current pace.
I think you and I both agree that the Lael Collins injury is definitely more significant than the Michael Gallup one, though, right? Not injury, sorry. I gotta stop saying injury for Lael Collins. Suspension, right? Not having him is more detrimental than Michael Gallup not being on the field.
Yeah, in the sense of these missing these next few games. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just because of and I think a lot of that, like I said, has to do with who you're playing.
Yeah.
Than it does kind of just overall. But I definitely would agree.
All right, let's take one more quick break so I can tell you guys about DirecTV.com. DirecTV Stream brings you live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, which means you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. And the best part, there's no annual contract. So stop waiting and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at DirecTV.com. That's DirecTV.com. Also want to tell you guys about Built Bar. You guys know Built Bar. It's the best tasting protein bar out there. It's hard to even explain it. Real chocolate with amazing flavors. It's just a great combination of low calories, high protein, and low sugar with no crazy additives. Best of all, they taste fantastic. Go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKEDON to get 15% off your next box at BuiltBar.com. All right, Landon, let's talk about the NFC East on Sunday. And let's start with Washington, who a lot of people believe are the biggest challenger to the Cowboys to win the division. Washington lost to the Chargers at home, which is quite shocking, especially when you consider it was a 1 p.m. kickoff. And that's typically where the Chargers have struggled. But Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's going to be out for a while. He has a hip injury. They've already placed him on the injured reserve list. I saw a couple Twitter doctors saying today it could potentially be a 3 or 4 month injury. And now it's going to be Taylor Heinicke starting on Thursday night against the Giants. I know you watched a lot of that game. What did you think of Washington?
Well, I thought that, Fitzpatrick looked about as Fitzpatrick as he always does before he got injured. I thought that Taylor Heinicke came in and, I think Heinicke's the kind of guy that if he comes into a game after Fitzpatrick is injured, he's dangerous because he can move a little bit with his legs. He can throw the ball around the yard a bit. He's actually a really good backup guy, I think, because of those reasons. If he's the designated starter for multiple weeks, they're in trouble. I just think that if you can game plan against him, he can make some things happen for sure, but it's a lot like what we saw with Jalen Hurts last year, and we'll talk about Jalen Hurts this year in a little while. Mm-hmm. But where it's just a level of inconsistency that's there. I think he needs to focus a lot. He's going to need to focus a lot on Terry McLaurin, and so teams are going to have to start defenses are going to have to start focusing on him. But I think that you've added more volatility somehow by adding in Tyler Heinicke and removing Ryan Fitzpatrick. I have less faith in this offense than I did before. Yep. And I don't know, man. They're going to have a really tough stretch without Fitzpatrick. And I think that it's really going to put a strain on Heinicke to try to produce points when their defense and frankly, their defense didn't play as fantastic as everyone expected, and I think that kind of speaks to, even though they have incredible personnel, maybe the best in the NFL, that defense is really fluky, and that it's really, really, a roller coaster, and mostly based on the offenses you face. So, I think that, to me, the Washington football team took a step back. I mean, obviously because of their quarterback injury, but also partially based on how they looked.
They play the Giants here on Thursday Night Football, which is a quick turnaround. And how the game is at home. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a big game for both these teams, right?
That's a Thursday Night Football game.
No, that's a Thursday night game. Now,
that's a Thursday night.
Here's
football.
why I say it's a big game for Washington. I'm going to read you the games that they play directly after that one. Are you ready, Landon?
Let's hear it. I might have to spit take you this year.
Yeah. So that's home against the Giants, and then it's at Buffalo, at Atlanta, which they should win that game against Atlanta based on what we saw this week. Home against the Saints, home against the Chiefs, at the Packers, at the Broncos, home against the Bucks. That is brutal schedule there.
They may win that at Packers game, but oh man, that game was so good.
That was so bad.
I had to call it. Real quick story. I had to call Marcus because I was watching several other games, and I couldn't watch that game because it was the televised game, and I was watching the other televised game.
Sure.
And I just checked the stats real quick, and I was like, "Oh my God, what happened?" I called Marcus to make sure that I hadn't missed, like, I don't know, Aaron Rodgers' leg falling off. But anyways, yeah.
I mean, you might as well have how bad he played. They look awful. They'll be fine.
That man bun, that's really just
fine.
not doing him any
It's just this Washington team, man, they got a really tough stretch coming up. It would not be surprising if they go 2-5, 2-6 to start the year. And without Ryan Fitzpatrick, not going to be a lot of wiggle room there. Let's talk about the Giants. Oh, man. I am so glad Jason Garrett is in New York. I love it. I think they're great. So, a couple stats for you, Landon. Last 7 games for the Giants with Jason Garrett as their offensive coordinator, they're averaging under 14 points per game. Not very good. Daniel Jones looks like Daniel Jones. No. Over the last 17 games for the Giants, 17.3 points per game on offense. They have not had a game of over 265 passing yards in 26 games. Daniel Jones is probably not it. And man, it seems like the Giants are just going nowhere this season.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the Giants is that we keep talking about their defense and what Patrick Graham's doing. And again, kind of going back to the flukiness of defense, the Denver Broncos scored 27 points against them.
And it should have been way more.
It should have been way more with Teddy Bridgewater as their quarterback. Bridgewater threw for almost 80% against them.
They had a deep ball to KJ Hamler right in the second half that Bridgewater put it just on a rope, and it hit Hamler right in the hands, wide open, dropped it for a touchdown. Jerry Jeudy got hurt at halftime in this game, and they still put up 27 points.
And Daniel Jones is still, Daniel Jones. You saw the fumble. You saw, completing, I think, something underneath 60% of his passes. Like, he could run the ball. Sure. He ran the ball better than Barkley did. And Barkley doesn't look the back yet. And I think they ended up trotting Booker out there almost as much as they did Barkley.
They did. Yep.
I had a hard time. I had a hard time seeing it with them before, and now it's like this is exactly the same team that we saw last year, except maybe their defense isn't as good as it was.
This is of all the teams in the NFC East, this is the one I'm the least concerned about because the quarterback's not good, the offensive line's not very good, the skill players are so up and down, and I just don't trust their coaching at all to maximize their talent. So a rough week 1 game for the Giants, but a team that did not have a rough week 1, Philadelphia Eagles, actually looked pretty competent against the Falcons. They won 32-6 on the road in Atlanta. Jalen Hurts, 27 of 35 for 264 yards and 3 touchdowns. Devontae Smith looked pretty good. Now, I'm not sure how much of that is the Eagles looking good or the Falcons just being awful, but I got to give credit to Philadelphia. They went into Atlanta and they won that game, so kudos to them. Any thoughts on Philadelphia?
Yeah, I mean, they played a really good game. I thought the key there was that their offensive line just absolutely dominated the Falcons' defensive line. Just absolutely dominated both sides of the ball. They were averaging over 5.5 yards a carry on the ground. And then Jalen Hurts basically had all day. to
Yep.
sit back in the pocket and deliver the ball. Didn't seem especially pressured or anything like that. So I think that was really the big story is that, if you're not going to get any pressure against Jalen Hurts and against that offense, they can play 7-on-7 for sure. But if the coverage wasn't exactly good either for Atlanta. And then on the defensive side, I mean, I think we knew that Philadelphia had some horses on the defensive side. That's not surprising. The pass rush looked really good for them. So, again, I don't think it should be a surprise that Philadelphia has good offensive and defensive line. I think we knew that coming in. The question has been kind of the skill guys. I still expect things to be roller coaster-ish with these guys. I just don't know that Jalen Hurts week to week is going to be able to reproduce this.
Correct.
So we'll see exactly, what this is. But I would say that if we're looking at week one and how it may realign our expectations for what's going to happen in the NFC East, I think if there's reason to believe that the Eagles now have bumped themselves up as primary, competition for the Cowboys to win the NFC East.
Which is shocking, right? I mean, because I don't think anybody was expecting that at all. Now, they have a big game this week against San Francisco. I think we'll learn a lot about the Eagles here in week 2. Then they play the Cowboys in week 3 on Monday Night Football. We're going to learn a lot about this Eagles team, if they're real contenders or are they just one of these teams that had a fluky week 1, which we see from time to time, right? Like, for example, Landon, last year, Jacksonville beat the Colts in week 1. And a lot of people thought the Colts were really good, and they were good. They made the playoffs. Jacksonville didn't win a game the rest of the season. Are the Eagles just one of those fluky teams because there's a new head coach that Atlanta wasn't able to game plan for? Arthur Smith is a new head coach for the Falcons. I don't know, but I do think we're going to learn a lot about this Falcons team, or excuse me, this Eagles team. One more thing before we go. Kind of resetting the NFC East. If you had to have a favorite to win this division, are you still picking the Cowboys?
Yeah, I'm still picking the Cowboys. In fact, I feel more confident about the Cowboys winning the East now than I did before week 1, just because Washington doesn't seem to be the team to worry about, especially now with the injury. They're probably going to take some losses that are going to be tough to overcome. New York is, New York. everything didn't get magically better in New York the way that everyone anticipated.
Shocked.
Yeah. So, and then Philadelphia, I mean, I think they clearly have shown themselves to be, at least early on, the competition that the Cowboys need to worry about. But I just don't. I have a hard time putting my faith in that group as of right now for the long term. We'll see. I mean, I'm certainly, we may be eating crow on Tuesday night after that Monday Night Football game, but I'm not quite ready to crown them champions. I think the Cowboys have the best quarterback, have the best offense. And I think that's, ultimately what wins football games in the NFL and likely will win them the NFC East.
All right, that is it for today's show. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, you can download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Make sure you're checking us out on Twitter at Locked On Cowboys. You can follow Landon at McCool BCB, and I'm at Marcus_Mosher. We'll see you next time.